Welcome to our Living Stones podcast, where we gather to discuss all matters of faith and life as members of God's household. In a world that often leaves us feeling fragmented and disconnected, our hope is that Living Stones will help to further connect us as we pursue the Lord together. I'm your host, Davina, and we will be continuing this two-part series with Jeremiah here to talk specifically more about the different opportunities, the challenges, the joys, and to talk about missions, because I want to take advantage of him while he's here because he's leaving soon.
Yes.
I probably won't see him again until next year.
Yeah.
Or Christmas?
Maybe. We'll see.
But
We'll
Christmas
see
was
what
a
the
couple
plan
weeks
is.
ago. Okay, so we did talk about Jeremiah's story about his call into missions, how he got into Thailand specifically, and then the work that he does there, the type of people that he ministers to. So if you missed that one, make sure that you just click or scroll back to that first episode and get to know Jeremiah a little more. Let's talk about the challenges in ministry. What has been some of the most significant challenges that you faced as a missionary in Thailand?
Going back to even my time without the Way Center yet, but my time at ICS, there was the COVID season. And I think even before I talk about the ministry aspect of things, it's the physical side of knowing that I don't know when this is going to end. I'm not going to be able to go back home, but more importantly, I'm alone.
Yeah.
And there's no other person to talk to. I'm going to be there by myself, and Thailand even mandated at that time there was a 9 p.m. curfew. So they went really strict in Thailand. And so I remember just thinking to myself that this is going to be difficult. Like, as much as I'm an introvert and people would love being an introvert during COVID season, I still needed to interact with people and be with people to...
Right. Relationship building. Yeah.
So I think that was definitely one of the parts that were very challenging. One of the biggest ones during my time there. Now this is my 8th year, but that definitely is one that really sticks out as a challenge there. Speaking more about the Way Center and how that all happened, I remember being so excited because I thought I found the best ministry building.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit further from where my current Way Center is, but it's bigger, and I just thought it was the best ministry building in the world. And so we talked to the landlord, and we had a verbal agreement all in place. I told my family about it, and I was so excited. And the agent that was helping me contacted me back and said, the landlord has decided to give it to someone else.
Oh.
And I was so devastated to the point where I remember calling my family back at home and saying, maybe this is God's sign that I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, it's time to come back home, and I've done a lot, and it's just time to come back home.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to the point where that loss of the building really started to mess with my mind and even my purpose out there.
Yeah.
Thankfully, fast forward, I'm able to be in a place that's more affordable, more convenient, and very accessible to the community. And so that's God's hand all over that, saying, no, you don't need this. I have something better for you in that. But fun story, but also one of the biggest challenges in the beginning of the Way Center was that the Way Center is very run down when I first got it. And so there was a big renovation plan in place. And as the renovations were happening, I thought I hired a very loyal contractor with integrity, and he's everything at the beginning was checking out well, and he had a team, and he said, hey, these are going to be the expenses. Can you deposit or transfer this money first, because I need to pay the workers, I need to buy the materials. And so I was like, oh yeah, that all makes sense. So paying, and then he'll do it again, and he's like, this is the cost, and these are all costs that I knew that was going to come out anyway, so it didn't really bother me. And he was asking for it at little increments. So I was like, okay, this is okay. And then there's one more where he said, we need to buy like the big stuff now, and so can you transfer this money as well? Still all part of the budget. Didn't think twice about it. Very nice guy. And so I transferred it, and meanwhile, the agent is still helping me throughout this whole process because my Thai at the time wasn't very good, and so she's playing middleman for me and this contractor.
Yeah.
And I just remember her message saying, he's gone. And I was like, what do you mean he's gone? It's like, he's gone. Like he deleted all his information, his account. It's no longer there. And I was like, but we just gave, X amount of dollars more to him. Like, what's going to happen with that? And she's like, there's no trace of him. And so I remember even then being like, wow, like this is how this ministry is going to start, like off the back of, a scam basically.
Yeah, dishonesty and
Yeah.
jeez.
And later I found out actually that it's pretty common in Thailand to have these situations. So I talked to different missionaries and I was like, oh my gosh, this happened to me. I can't believe this happened. And they're like, oh yeah, it's happened to us too. So I didn't know how common it is, but now I am more aware and know how to approach situations like this better. But I remember financially, that was a big challenge right away.
Yeah.
Starting out thinking that you're going to have X amount of dollars to renovate and knowing that a chunk of it was taken from you
Yeah.
was a big part of it. And now that I'm in ministry more, I realize the real spiritual heaviness and darkness of just being in Thailand. Even it could be as simple as seeing the monks in the morning walk by and seeing the Thai people, paying their respects, giving of the alms. And
what is the predominant religion there?
Buddhism.
Right.
Very heavy Buddhism. And I think that is very much of not only their religion, but also their identity.
It also makes sense how the culture is very considerate then. Okay.
So seeing everything that I do, and especially when daytime becomes nighttime, and you just see things, and you feel the heaviness of the country, and the burden for the country, and then also specifically with the ministries that we do and the programs that we hold. There's a point that both me and Kwang, we both looked at each other at one point about a 1.5 year, 2 year mark of the ministry. And we both just kind of paused and said, why does it seem like we're doing everything, but there's no fruit that's coming from it? And so it really was this questioning of, are we doing everything right? Is our approach wrong? What's happening here? And that's really just the self-doubt part, because there's ultimately nothing that we can do. It's ultimately me being faithful to what God has called me to do, and God is in control of that situation, and He's gonna increase the hearts of those that we reach out to. So, and we hear stories, right? We hear stories of these missionaries who go out and they reach out to a people group for so long and they don't see any fruit. And by the time they leave the mission field, then the fruit starts to harvest, and realizing that despite the challenge of not seeing immediate fruit so quickly in everyone that we reach out to, that God is still working in that, and we just need to be faithful.
How, at one point, did you, I guess, feel that sense of, okay, my job is to be faithful regardless of this fruit that I'm not seeing? Because there was clearly a point of both of you, Kwang, right? And you being discouraged. And then what was even though maybe things didn't change, what was that turning point like in your heart?
It was the stories that I was reminded of again from the missionaries who have done this so long before me. And it was never about just the numbers, right? It was more about the hearts and being faithful to what God has called them to do, and knowing ultimately that there really is nothing. I'm just being a faithful steward for God, and as I'm out there through wisdom, knowing the next steps, being faithful to what He's asking of me.
Yeah.
And whether I get to see transformation happening in many lives or it happens to be 2 lives, I know that we celebrate that as well.
Nice.
That more have come into God's family.
By the way, that's such a gift that God just kind of can impress these things on you. Like anyone can go through like a difficult situation and hear or read stories and read scripture and still, not feel encouraged, but you did. And so to me, that's another sign of that you're where you're supposed to be. Like God gives you exactly what you need.
Right.
Like even if it's like an encouragement through the stories of different missionaries.
Amen.
That's really encouraging, Jeremiah. Now, let's flip the question. What are some joys? You can share a specific story. I feel like you kind of already touched on the joys when you talked about how the children's faces light up in the last episode.
Yeah, I would say the relationship building is the joy that I get, even not only the children in the underprivileged community around the Way Center, but even I try to maintain relationships with students that I don't teach anymore as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings me joy when they come back into my classroom and want to have those difficult conversations or open up about something that's going on in their life, and realizing that they trust me, and we've built a relationship and bond where they know that I'm going to be there for them. And ultimately that through all of that, God is going to be glorified in that. And so there's been conversations where it is just about family and brokenness in family, but it's also been times where they really just have questions. Like, I am curious. I'm curious about God a little bit more, but can you help me through this? And I'm like, you have time? You want to come after school? And they're like, yeah, I'll come.
Wow.
And so I love that about our school, because that's exactly what our administration wants. They don't want it to just be, no, school's over, don't come. But it's like, how do we continue to build those relationships even outside of the classroom doors? So that's been a huge joy. And speaking of ICS and building those relationships, I really do think I have the best job in the world, because
Nice.
I get to wake up every day and teach the Bible. So my job, and during my planning time, is to read scripture and it's to dive deep into God's word. And then what's on the other side? I get to share this good news with students who may not have received it yet, or may not believe it yet.
The kids are coming to you.
Yeah, and I don't even need to do the heavy lifting. They're coming to me. So
They're going to Bible class.
Yes.
These non-Christians.
And they know that there's no, like, they've a lot of these students have been there since, so our school is from preschool all the way to 12th grade.
Oh, wow.
We have about 1,200 students in between all of that. So it's a pretty big school. But a lot of our...
teach the whole range?
I teach currently I am specifically middle school,
Right.
grade 6 and grade 7 specific. But a lot of these students end up coming during their preschool years and staying throughout their time at ICS. And so a lot of these students, when they come into my doors, they already know the Bible stories, but they're really looking for a little bit deeper of a conversation. And so I really like being in middle school now. Previously, I was teaching elementary school at the school. And even then, we have intentional Bible classes that are embedded into the curriculum. But now that I am the middle school Bible teacher, it's a completely different experience where they're literally coming into my classroom and they're there because of one purpose. They're there to hear God's word.
Yeah. Wow.
So I have the best job in the world.
You do. Like, I was going to ask, what is a unique opportunity of the gospel? I mean, you not only have a unique opportunity, you have the best opportunity. Mm-hmm. Jeez, you can't beat that. Oh, well, how strategic.
Very strategic. And I mean, that goes with I guess going back to the challenges as well, though, is because they've been through our schooling for so long and they've heard the stories, they're looking for something more, but also as they're looking for something more, they're also asking the difficult questions, the apologetics as well. And so that's been a place where I've been really praying and discerning with is, how do I best approach these questions, coming off in a way that is how God is glorified through it. I guess one example of this would be, there's a student that we do memory verses, and they know to come in, and most of the students, they're waiting outside the classroom door like, what's the memory verse again? Like, all right, let's say. All right, we got to remember it. And then they get in and they're ready and they write it down, and then I collect it. And it's really not a big deal if you don't know it. It's just, I'll just come talk to him later. It's like, hey, why didn't you do it? And we'll figure it out. And so God's even working in those opportunities where, how do you approach situations where the non-Christians are going to come? Their parents are even saying, when you go into Bible class, don't listen to anything. Do what the teacher's saying. Be respectful, but you don't need to believe any of it. But you can clearly see that God is still working in their hearts.
Yeah. I mean, especially if like there's an example of someone that is clearly showing kindness, especially as a teacher that doesn't have to,
Right.
because you're an authority figure.
Hmm.
And I'm sure like that kind of impression, that's a seed planted, a plant seeded.
Yes. Going back to the other episode.
Yeah. Okay, so can you share a story where you clearly saw God in a situation?
These are recent, but I love both of these because it really does show God at work. And I'll start with ICS. ICS, naturally, as a teacher, I love data.
Mhm.
And so I asked students to take surveys throughout the year. And some of these surveys are just about the class in general. But at the end of the year, I asked a very simple survey and just wanted to know where the students were. And some of the surveys were just saying phrases like, I am a Christian and I'm still a Christian. I keep it very basic for them. Others are like, I'm not a Christian, but I'm interested in Christianity. Or another one is, I am a Christian, but I don't really know what I believe anymore.
Crazy how you can even send a survey like that.
Yeah, I can.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah.
So I would send that, and I looked at the data afterwards, and I teach. There's about 100 sixth graders and 100 seventh graders, so 200 students total that I'm constantly investing in throughout the year, and about 40 students checked off the I'm not a Christian, but I'm interested to know more. And I know it's not an anonymous survey. I know who exactly.
Oh.
And so it's these same students that I'm seeing this year. We have two main ministry events at our school. One is like a fun one. It's called FNF, Friday Night Fellowship. And it's literally just fun. And then we have another one that's called Kingdom Seekers, which is our worship night. And these are the students who checked off, I'm not Christian, but I'm interested. They're not only attending the fun one, but they're also going to the worship one as well to know more, because that one is literally, if you have no desire to know more about Jesus, it can be a really boring experience.
Yeah.
But there really is. And I know some people would think that grade 6 and 7 students are still very young, but they're at such a crucial age where they're starting to develop their own values and identity.
Yeah.
And even for myself, even though I grew up in the church, I credit 7th grade as a point where I was like, I really want to follow Jesus. And so I know that this is a crucial time for them. And so when I see those students intentionally trying to be plugged in more and know more about Jesus, it's amazing.
Yeah.
For TWC, the Way Center, recently this story has come up where these families would come into our ministry, and I talked about this in the other episode, but they would kind of question why we would do these things, and especially for free. And we tell them exactly who we are and why we're doing it, that we're part of a church, and that we're Christians, and we want to share God's love. And it takes a long time, but these parents will come with their children to these events, and during these events, we do these like little snippets of the gospel in our story. So it might be an art program, but we'll tie it in and say, even look at how your student A, look at how your artwork is so different from student B, and how unique and creative it is, that there's going to be no other one like that. And that's exactly what we are as Christians, right? God has created us. And so we have these like little snippets. And so these parents are able to hear this in the background as they're waiting for their child. And just recently, 2 families have approached and said, we want to know more. What is the next step? And that's, I think, so crucial, because not only is it the sharing of the gospel, but what is the next step? And I believe in one of the Livingstone podcasts, you guys talked about that, a more holistic approach. And this was what we've been praying for, is what is the next step? It's not just sharing, but they need to know where to go from here.
Yeah.
And God just orchestrated it all perfectly, where Kwang's church, it's a Thai church, but their ministry leader and the pastors and the leadership team knows about the Way Center, and they said, we want to partner with you, and we want to send help, we want to send volunteers, and we want to be a connection, a bridge piece for the Way Center. And it was perfect timing, because these families approached, it was Christmas time, and Kwang said, I have the perfect opportunity. Why don't you come to our Christmas event?
Wow.
And just come out, just see what it's about. And that was just prayers and prayers and prayers being answered, that not only would people hear the gospel, but we would have steps ahead
and
as well.
have a church to bridge them too.
Right.
It's incredible.
It's very incredible.
That's exactly what, I mean, I think what the Lord wants, right?
Yes.
That's what Paul in the Bible did. Like it is. And I love that it's multi-generational. It wasn't just the students that you reached out to.
Right.
The parents, as you were saying, they were listening in the back. There were being seeds planted in them too.
This is going to be a thing for the podcast. I can feel it. Someone's going to approach me and say just like that.
That's so encouraging.
It's been, yeah. And those are the moments that really replenish and refuel you as you continue on to do ministry.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, even one soul saved.
It was worth it.
Oh my goodness. Talking about Kwang's church. Is it Kwang or Kwang?
Kwang, Kwang.
Okay, Kwang. Like Korean Kwang.
Yeah, she's actually, little fun fact about her. We had an opening ceremony at the Way Center, and she's musically gifted, artistically gifted, cafe barista gifted, like everything. And I was like, do you think you can sing this song in Korean? Because there's a lot of Korean missionaries that were coming to the opening ceremony, and she's like, I'll try. And she actually sang it in Korean as well. And so she has a Korean type name as well, but she sang in Korean. Some people mistaken her for being Korean.
Oh, does she look Korean too?
She does look Korean as well. So
She feel like Kwang은.
Yeah.
Like 32nd syllable. But I think I wanted to know a little more on your perspective on the global church, and that as in I really believe that the movement of the capital C church should be to disciple to all nations, right? To make disciples of all nations. And so how have you seen that happen, I guess, in your experience? I remember even outside of this recording, you were talking about different teams coming from all over.
I don't know too much about everything that's going on. However, I do know, like, for example, like we think of South Korea.
Yeah.
And there was always that statistic that South Korea used to send out the most missionaries in the world.
Yeah.
And that has dwindled drastically.
Right.
And so there are still people who are sending teams out, and there are countries who are sending teams out to the unreached places. And it's still a very much needed effort. However, I'm really not sure about how many. One thing that I am actually really encouraged by is that our school embodies many different denominations. And growing up, international.
Even in denominations.
Yes. And growing up, attending CFAN, and I did actually attend a church before CFAN, but CFAN being my sending church right now, and being PCA, and kind of holding true to those values. Going out there, I realized that our school is made up of so many different denominations, and how beautiful it is, despite having different perspectives and views on different areas, that we all have the same goal, which is to preach the gospel, to share the gospel. Now, of course, having the same core beliefs is very important, but it's a beautiful thing to be able to see the Baptist church and the Pentecostal and everyone else. We're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
And that's one eye-opening moment for me, because when I only attend one church, I only see that one view, and being out there now, I realize we can, what is it called? Agree to disagree.
Yeah, we can agree to disagree.
We can agree to disagree as long as we keep the core values true.
Yes.
And I believe for many that are out there, that is true. And the ones that I've interacted with, I realize that God can use many different people. And so for the global church, I think within even Thailand, I can see that if he's using these missionaries from different backgrounds, different countries, different denominations, then surely God is at work in other areas as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I can also see how, like, for you, especially since most of your time is there now, like, although you mentioned how you grew up here and your church family was here, basically that's still considered a global, you're being a part of a global church over there. And like you're personally experiencing what it looks like to like kind of have that sense of camaraderie, no matter if you grew up with them or not.
Right.
And I feel like that's really encouraging too, not only as a missionary, but like as a fellow Christian sitting here in Virginia to hear about how the other churches around you are supporting you. Like even when you shared the story about Kwang's church, how there is a space for these people to be able to go to once you minister to them. That's the most important thing, sustaining faith. How do you personally stay motivated in your faith? Because although I can sense and feel how much you love these kids and you do have friendships over there, I'm sure it's still very different from here. You are still away from your family. So yeah, like, is it something that's just natural for you? Just have that energy that like God blesses you with every day? And what do you do when you're like feeling down and not wanting to do it?
That's a really, really good question. I credit a lot to ICS. Like I said in the name, there's the word community, and not only is a community for that teacher-student relationship and the families there, but it's very clear that the leadership team and the admin, they start with the source, which is the teachers, and the teachers are going to be the ones to go out. And so they've developed an incredible community there where they remind us and encourage us often through devotions and through other gatherings where we are constantly reminded of what we're doing out there. Not only that, it was a requirement for a long time. I'm not sure if they got rid of it or I just passed the required section now, but when you first get there, you are required to do counseling sessions as you get out there as a adjusting period. And so they have all these supporting platforms in place for the teachers so that they can really make sure that you are able to serve at your potential, and not only that, but serve with a heart of purpose.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. They're very thoughtful for their teachers.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, it really is that, and I don't use it as a cop-out answer, but there was this friend that I met when I first arrived that I've known before even living in Thailand, and that friend said, "Oh, Jeremiah, in about 2 years, when we meet again, you're going to tell me how tiring Thailand is and you're going to want to go home." And so I actually met with that friend 2 years later, and that friend was like, "So?" And I said, "No, I'm loving it.
Wow.
I'm still so passionate about it." And it truly is just God's work because like you said, I am a big family person. I love my friends here. I love the church, and to take me away from that really has to be God's will for my life, being actively present and really giving me that peace. I would be lying if I said that it wasn't hard out there. I'd be lying if I said that leaving Dulles Airport every time as I wave bye to my family that, there's a desire for me to want to stay, but at the same time, there's a longing in my heart that I know that my purpose is to continue to be out there. And so that gives me the peace in my heart and the joy and the purpose to continue to go out there. And so it really is that there's no special ingredient to being out there and continuing to stay out there and stay motivated. It's ultimately God really instilling this missions heart, giving me that purpose to be out there. So,
and especially for some, like even hearing your story up until now and really seeing how much you care about these kids, it's so small compared to, I'm sure, how much you care about your family and your friends. And that is seriously what you have to shoulder. That's part of kind of the lot that God put on your plate.
Right.
And that is the reason why I couldn't do it. Honestly, like listening to you, like I feel so much for you. And although like at times painful and at times lonely, and that separation is not easy, oh, for sure, the work is so worthy. Like, I don't even have to tell you that. You know that. And so it's this hand in hand. You carry the sadness and like what you have to leave, because that's what you were called to do. And then this joy of, and this privilege that you have, that you get to bridge these people and these students to the Lord, to save their souls for the rest of eternity. There's no contest. And yet that is the sacrifice that God calls you to do. We've talked about this before, but kind of a tangent. We talked about this in the Advent, but there is something about, or Advent series, I think, maybe, but there is something about brokenness and like pain that not only makes us closer, brings us closer to God, but more like Christ. And it makes you actually be more like him, even in how you love others. It's like something about suffering makes you a better person and makes you a better missionary, rather than someone that's just walking around and that has like everything that they need. There's something different about that. So let's talk about like when you do visit home. When you visit here, like now you just said that you have been over in Thailand for 8 years. And I'm sure you have a very good sense of like the difference of lifestyle here versus there. You lived here your whole life. You taught here, and so you're part of like the working world for a year. And so now you're there and you're experiencing what you're experiencing. We talked about kind of the burdens that you carry along with it. So when you come home, what are some things that stick out to you?
I think Northern Virginia, the DMV in specific, has, the people living here even know that there's opportunities here. And sometimes that opportunity becomes a routine. You're going to church, you're working, you have family. You're going to church, you're working, your family. And sometimes the purpose could be lost in that. But I am a believer in missions. Yes, there is overseas missions, but missions is an opportunity wherever you are. And so when I hear friends that say, "Oh, you're doing amazing work out there," you know, or 고생, you're going through a lot of 고생. I'm like, no, we are all living our individual lives that present opportunities. And those opportunities look different for each of us. And those gospel sharing opportunities may look like, I remember in Missionary Mike's podcast, it might be driving.
You really do listen to these.
I do. I'm a fan of Living Stone's podcast. But it could be just driving someone somewhere and having conversations. It could be, see another one, painting or doing painting ministry.
Yes.
I remember my youth group, small group leader, we'd hang out a lot, and he'd take me and my other friends, and we'd hang out a lot after youth group night, and he'd take us to eat and everything. But I remember he would always make these intentional efforts. Whatever we talked about, he would always tie it back to God. And so even coming from Thailand, where it is heavily ministry focused, and then coming here, I still see so much value and purpose in what everyone is doing. Whether it is at work, whether it's with your family, whether it's within the church, there's a purpose in that. Whether you are encouraging or serving in the church, whether you are making those intentional efforts to share the gospel with someone who've you known for a very long time. Maybe it's that friend.
Yeah.
Those are all opportunities. And so missions is everywhere. I believe it. And it really does take kind of like my personality of being an introvert. It may take that extra step of faith and boldness to be like, but I've never shared about Jesus with this friend before. I don't know. But taking that step of faith and knowing that this is what God has called us to do, to live out a faith where he is glorified, where it's easily shown that you are an image of God. And if that's lived out in your life, it doesn't, I don't know, I might get backlash for this, but I believe if you're living a faithful life for God, it doesn't matter where you are. You can be a faithful steward for him in any circumstance, in any situation, in any place.
I totally agree. And you just inspired me. Sometimes I feel like and I'm sure like you feel this way too. I mean, you kind of mentioned it. Like when you've just kind of living your lifestyle and in living in one place and doing the same thing over and over, you kind of lose sight of like the missions aspect. And it's actually really easy to do if your life is work, family, church, work, family, church, work, family, church. And so that's actually very inspirational because you're right. Missions is everywhere, whether it's talking with your coworkers or like a friend that's struggling or a friend's friend, or even like we're always going out to like a restaurant or coffee shop, like through like those very micro conversations you never know.
Right.
And so I think the challenge is that we have to kind of always be mindful of who we are and what our purpose is, no matter where we are. Oh, I like that, Jeremiah. Are you a pastor or something? So with that, what encouragement or challenge would you give to our members specifically about missions? Again, we already kind of talked about it, but
like we said, missions is everywhere, and we can do that in our neighborhood. We could do that in our workspace, but I am also a firm believer. I've been using that a lot, but I'm also a firm believer in getting to experience a short-term missions trip. And I know there's different views and perspectives of, is it really worth the cost of, doing this 1 or 2 week trip? But a lot of things can happen during that time. And it may be, you hear it a lot, where it's the short-term missionaries who are going on the team that receive the biggest blessings. But now being on the other end, I do see the impact it has for the missionary there. Sometimes it really does depend. I do believe there's an approach to how short-term missions should be conducted. However, many times when the mission team comes, it is a huge encouragement for the missionary, because sometimes it is lonely. Sometimes you see the same faces. But knowing that there is a group that is physically coming out to you to encourage you, to say, we are always praying for you and we're there for you, it goes a very long way.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll see you in Thailand in some time
Sometime,
soon.
yes. So my encouragement is, even if it's a short one, even if it's a close one, try to go on one of these short-term mission trips.
Yeah. I was just talking to Pastor Paul not too long ago about how important short-term missions trips were. Not that he's against it, but I was saying how so many missionaries probably come out of these trips. And if not, so many young people's faiths are inspired and then kind of like almost like kickstarted. And I mean, you mentioned it even for you. It was through your parents taking you through these trips that you're one of those. You're the fruit of what it looks like to have gone to so many of these trips. So,
And it goes both ways, kind of going back to confirming a call or to go out to overseas missions, especially during our JMU days when we went to Nicaragua and Thailand as our main mission trips. And there is, as much as a retreat high, there's a missions high, and a lot of members will come back and say, this is what I want to do. And I usually say, let's wait a little bit and let's see what happens. And really, it's nothing against those members who had that heart initially. A lot of them are still in the DMV area and doing what they're doing. But that's another reason why short-term missions is important, is because it really can provide that opportunity to confirm that calling, or maybe there's a different way. And so I credit some of the friends that even went on these mission trips. They initially were like, I have a heart to serve. And they didn't realize that that heart to serve didn't necessarily mean for them to go abroad. But one of these brothers are specifically like really helping me out and supporting me and checking up on me. And that is a form of missions as well, where he's constantly supporting me. And so Yeah, it could mean missions could be going out there, but it could also be I want to support these missionaries who are going out.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm going to be doing my mission here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Your calling is your calling as his is his calling. And
exactly.
that goes for all of us. Like you are called to do missions. Some of us are called to be the sender. Some of us are called to, I don't know, be a pastor or whatever it is. And whatever it is, like we're called to be faithful to it. So again, very inspirational and very encouraging and challenging.
Yes.
I feel like it's very easy to forget. I'm sure that happens to you too. But in the mundaneness of just the 9 to 5, we need a lot of reminders too, as like the people supporting you. But did you have anything else that you'd like to share before we end?
The last thing I would say is it's something that recently over the summer really stood out to me was the word with or abide, you can also say, is really stood out because I just saw this random quote, and sometimes it's okay. So it was on Instagram out of all places,
Nice.
but I was scrolling, and I also have time to scroll a little bit. But one of the quotes that I saw said, "You could be doing something for God, but are you actually doing it with God?" And so that really got to me because there's moments where I'm like, well, God's telling me that I need to be a missionary, so I'm going to go out and be a missionary. I should say yes to this extra thing that this pastor or missionary is asking me to help with because that's the right thing to do. I should be building this relationship, and it becomes this I should, because that's what God wants of me. But then when I look at all that, kind of like the Mary Martha scenario, but am I actually doing it with God as well? And really realizing that is so much more important, because if you don't have the with, there's no purpose in the do. And so really taking that John 15, abide in me, because if you abide in me, then you will bear fruit. And naturally that fruit is going to cause a chain reaction, whether it be gospel ministry, whether it be encouraging your brothers and sisters around you.
Yeah.
So the last word would just be really ultimately, whether it is missions or not, there is one non-negotiable, and that is doing everything with God and abiding in Him in everything that we do.
Wow. Another great reminder. Jeez. I think I need to read my Bible more.
No.
I have been so encouraged by this, Jeremiah. I'm again surprised that we haven't talked in depth about all of this, but I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to even just talk between us two. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me. Like I said, I enjoy listening to these podcasts. So
yeah, now you're a part of it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be awkward if I try to listen to this recording.
Oh, I think you'll like it still. It's encouraging. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We will be, so one last thing that I would like to ask is how our church can pray for you. Are there a couple of prayer requests that you have that our listeners can keep in their prayers for you?
Please pray for wisdom, just in the everyday life of whether it be planning the second floor or engaging in relationships with students, knowing how to best approach that and doing what God's will is for me out there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
As we come to the end of this episode of Living Stones, we hope that you've been encouraged and blessed by Jeremiah, the work God is doing through him, and the insights offered. If you found value in today's episode, we encourage you to share it with others. Remember that you are not alone in this journey. We are members of God's household, united by our shared faith in the Lord and the desire to grow together. So until next time, may God's grace and peace be with you all. Thank you for being a part of Living Stones.